My name is Noelle Hartley, and up until that Tuesday afternoon, I thought I had a pretty ordinary life. I lived alone in a quiet corner of Seattle, spent my days editing manuscripts in sweatpants, and spoke to my parents on the phone every Sunday. Nothing remarkable, nothing strange, just a life I'd built slowly and quietly, like stacking books on a shelf. But all of that unraveled at exactly 2:17 p.m. inside a neighborhood pharmacy on East Pine Street. I'd been feeling awful all morning, some kind of flu brewing behind my eyes, so I dragged myself down the street to pick up antibiotics from a prescription I barely remember asking for. The air smelled like disinfectant and plastic bags. I was scrolling through an email from a client complaining about EM dashes when someone stepped into line behind me. She was older, gray hair pulled into a bun, garden gloves poking out of her tote bag. Harmless. Until she said, "You look just like my sister." I smiled the way you do when strangers say things like that. Soft, polite, dismissive. I'd heard it before. One of those faces, people say. But she didn't smile back. Her eyes filled with something else. Grief, maybe. Or shock. Then she said 5 words I will never forget. She disappeared when she was 7. I felt my chest go tight. I didn't say anything, just glanced forward, silently begging the line to move faster. Then she said my name. Not Noelle, not anything close to it. She said a name I'd never heard in my life, but somehow made the back of my neck prickle. And the thing is, I didn't correct her. Because somewhere, under the noise of the pharmacy and the static in my chest, something inside me whispered, she might be right. I didn't sleep that night. After the encounter at the pharmacy, I went home with the antibiotics still in the paper bag, and my head buzzing louder than the fever ever could. I must have replayed those 5 seconds 100 times. The exact moment her voice cracked. The way she looked at me, like she was seeing a ghost that wouldn't vanish. And that name, the one that didn't belong to me. Except now, I wasn't so sure. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, studying my face the way strangers study paintings they think they've seen before. My nose, my eyes, the faint scar above my eyebrow. I'd fallen off a swing when I was little, or so I'd been told. My parents always said they'd rushed me to urgent care and held my hand through the stitches. But I couldn't remember that day, not really. I only remembered the story, the photos afterward, the way my mom used to retell it like a bedtime fable. There were a lot of things like that in my childhood. Things I knew because I'd been told them, not because I'd lived them. At 33, I thought I was past questioning who I was. I grew up in Tacoma, moved to Seattle after college. I worked as a freelance editor, mostly historical fiction and the occasional memoir. I liked deadlines and solitude and grocery shopping on Wednesday mornings when the aisles were empty. I had no siblings, no extended family I kept in touch with. Just my mom Elise and my dad Robert, who lived in a small house with a red door and a perfectly trimmed lawn. They loved me, they always had. But I also had no photos of myself before age 3. Whenever I asked, Mom would say there'd been a house fire. It destroyed everything, she said once while stirring pasta sauce, like it was just another inconvenience. Old toys, baby pictures, all of it. You were so little you don't remember. That was the story, one of many. I never pushed. That night, though, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a USB drive with scanned photos Mom had sent me for a slideshow I made on their 30th anniversary. I plugged it in, heart thudding. The earliest picture was me, age 3, sitting cross-legged in a park, wearing overalls and holding a melting popsicle. The file name said birthday03.jpg. I clicked through them, one by one. Always age 3 and up. No baby blanket, no hospital bracelet, no first steps. Just a girl who seemingly appeared one day and was suddenly old enough to pose for the camera. And then I remembered something that made my stomach sink. My birth certificate. I'd seen it once, years ago when I applied for a passport. I remembered thinking how new it looked, like it had been printed at a copy shop. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my skin felt too tight, my breath too shallow, and the name that woman had spoken at the pharmacy wouldn't stop echoing in my head. The next morning, I called my mom. She answered in her usual sing-song voice. "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Fine," I said. "Just a little tired." We talked about nothing. The weather, the grocery store, a new neighbor with a yappy dog. Then I asked, "Hey, do you remember where we lived before Tacoma?" There was a pause. Then, "You mean before the fire?" "Yeah." Another pause. Longer. "I think it was somewhere in southern Oregon," she said eventually. "Why?" "No reason," I lied. But I felt her shift. Something in her voice tensed, just slightly. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what else she wasn't saying. I told myself I wasn't going to spiral, that this was all just a coincidence, a harmless case of mistaken identity. But that quiet, suspicious corner of my mind, the one I usually ignored, was now wide awake, rifling through every memory I had like it was trying to find a crack in the floor. By noon, I had a headache worse than the infection I was supposedly treating. So I called Daphne. She was my closest friend in Seattle, a pediatric nurse with a brutal honesty I usually appreciated and sometimes dreaded. She showed up at my apartment in her blue scrubs, holding iced tea and one raised eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. Maybe I did. I told her everything: the woman at the pharmacy, the name, the scar, the photos that started too late, the conversation with my mom that morning. Daphne listened without interrupting, which was rare. Then she leaned back on my couch and said, "Okay, that's either the weirdest story I've ever heard, or the beginning of one hell of a documentary. Don't joke." "I'm not." "Noelle, if someone walked up to me and started listing things about my body they couldn't possibly know, I'd be running a background check on myself by now." "I'm not running a background check on myself." "Why not?" That stopped me. I didn't have an answer. Daphne took my laptop off the coffee table, opened it, and started typing like she was born to break a conspiracy. "What was her name again?" "I don't know. She never gave me hers. Just her sister's. The one she thinks I am." Daphne kept typing. "Okay, what was that name?" I hesitated, then said it out loud for the first time. "Eleanor." Daphne froze. "Eleanor what?" "I don't know. She didn't say." We sat in silence for a moment. Daphne clicked open Facebook. "Well, let's look anyway." We searched for combinations. Eleanor missing, Eleanor 1990s, Oregon, Washington. Nothing. Then I added, "She said her sister disappeared when she was 7. That was her exact wording." Daphne added the word "missing" to the search and narrowed the date. "That's when we found her. Lena McKinley, retired elementary school teacher, lives in Seattle. Profile picture showed her in a garden surrounded by sunflowers. Her bio said, advocate for missing children, sister, survivor." My breath caught in my throat. Daphne clicked through Lena's photos. We found one album titled Never Forgotten. We hovered for a second, then clicked. The first picture was a school photo of a girl, maybe 7, missing front teeth, big green eyes, a pink bike helmet slung over one shoulder. It could have been me. It looked more like me than any of the toddler pictures I didn't have. "I need to talk to her," I whispered. "Yeah," Daphne said quietly. "You really do." I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing my apartment. I wrote and rewrote a message to Lena at least 10 times before finally sending, "Hi, this is Noelle. We met yesterday at the pharmacy. I think we need to talk." She replied 10 minutes later. "Thank you. I've been hoping you would." She suggested we meet the next morning. "Quiet place," she said. "Somewhere safe, in case I got overwhelmed." I chose the Blue Fern Cafe near Pike Street, not far from where I lived. Neutral ground, familiar walls. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was something else. Something I couldn't name yet, but I knew it had teeth. The Blue Fern Cafe smelled like cinnamon and old wood, the kind of place where time slowed down. I got there 10 minutes early and chose a corner table near the window. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. First with the spoon, then the sugar packet, then the edge of the napkin. When Lena walked in, I recognized her instantly. Same gray bun, same steady eyes. But she looked different this time, more fragile somehow, like she hadn't slept in days. She walked toward me, holding a large canvas tote bag, and something else tucked beneath her arm, a slim manila folder. I stood to greet her. We didn't hug. She just nodded once, like she was afraid one wrong movement might scare me away. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. She sat down carefully. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she placed the tote on the chair beside her. "I want you to know, whatever comes of this, I'm grateful you reached out." We sat in silence for a moment before the waitress came. I ordered tea. Lena didn't order anything. I don't think she even looked at the menu. Then she reached for the folder. "These are copies," she said. "I didn't want to overwhelm you, but I thought, you might want to see some of it." She opened the folder and began laying out pieces of a life that, according to her, had once been mine. Newspaper clippings, missing posters, a photo of a girl on a red tricycle with white streamers, another of a little girl asleep on a couch, clutching a gray stuffed rabbit. Every image hit me like a wave I wasn't ready for. I knew that rabbit. I didn't know how or why, but I knew the feel of its ears between my fingers. I knew the frayed thread near its neck. "You used to call him Button," Lena said, noticing my reaction. "You wouldn't go anywhere without him." I pressed my palms flat on the table. "She went missing in June of 1996, Lena continued, "from our backyard in Eugene. I left her playing on the swing set for 5 minutes to answer the phone. When I came back, she was gone." "I don't remember any of this," I said. "You were 6. Trauma can do that. And sometimes, people work very hard to make sure you don't remember." That made something in my chest twist. Lena took a breath, then pulled one last item from the tote bag. A plastic zip case. Inside it, a home DNA test kit. "I already took mine," she said. "I didn't want to ask anything of you, but if you're willing, this will tell us." I stared at the kit. It looked so ordinary. A few swabs, a barcode, a box. But it might as well have been a hand grenade on the table between us. "What happens if I am her?" I asked. "What happens to the people who raised me?" Lena didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't know. I'm not here to destroy your life. I just never stopped looking, not for one day." Her eyes shone, but she didn't cry. "You might not remember me," she added, "but I remember you. I remember the way you'd ask for apple slices with the skin peeled off, the way you'd fall asleep on car rides holding my sleeve." I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't walk away either, so I reached for the kit, and as I swabbed the inside of my cheek with trembling fingers, I felt something shift inside me, like a door opening just a crack in a room I'd never dared enter. The DNA results came on a Monday. Subject line plain as a grocery receipt. "Your DNA report is ready." I opened it in silence. No dramatic music, no gasp, just numbers, 99.9% match. I was Eleanor McKinley. I sat on my kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, and let the truth pour through me. Not rage, not even grief, just the quiet collapse of a life built on borrowed names. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house, the Hartleys. Mom opened the door, smile faltering when she saw my face. Dad was already seated, newspaper folded neatly on the coffee table, as if pretending this wasn't about to happen. I handed them the printout. No words. Mom spoke first. "We were told you'd been abandoned. A friend of a friend said she knew someone, a little girl who needed a home. You moved states, changed names." Dad didn't look at me. "We thought no one was looking." "She was," I said, "for 27 years. Mom started to cry. "We loved you." "I know," I said, "but love doesn't erase theft." Their silence told me everything. They had suspected, maybe even known, but they chose comfort over truth. "I'm not calling the police," I added quietly, "but I need distance. I need time to understand who I am, without you telling me." I left without another word. Back at my apartment, I stared at the name printed on the DNA report. It didn't fit yet, but it didn't feel wrong either. That night, I changed my email signature to Noelle McKinley Hartley. 2 lives, 1 body, a truth that finally had a name. Lena invited me to dinner the following weekend. Nothing formal, she said. Just lasagna and a few people who've been waiting a long time. I almost didn't go. Part of me was still standing in my parents' living room, hearing the word abandoned, like it was a defense. Part of me wasn't sure I deserved a second family, or if I could face one. But I went. Lena's house was small, 2 stories with ivy climbing one side. It smelled like baked tomatoes and basil, and there were too many picture frames for the number of walls. Photos of a life I never got to live. Birthday hats, Christmas mornings, summers at the lake. Her voice shook slightly when she introduced me. This is my sister. The word caught in my chest. Margot stood just behind her, holding a casserole dish. Her hair was darker than mine, shorter, curled around her cheeks. She looked at me for a moment too long before setting the lasagna down. I brought dessert, too, she said. Apple crumble. You used to love it. I nodded, unsure how to respond to memories that weren't mine. Dinner was strange in the way grief is strange when it's quiet. No shouting, no tears, just the silence of people relearning how to sit together. Jude, Margot's 10-year-old son, sat beside me and peeked at me every few minutes like I might vanish mid-bite. Afterward, Margot asked if we could talk outside. We stood on the back porch beneath string lights and a sky too wide for how small I felt. I never stopped thinking about you, she said. I was 8 when you disappeared. I checked the swing set every morning for a year. I didn't know what to say. She handed me a small wooden box. These were yours. Inside, a summer camp bracelet, a crayon drawing of a whale, and a gold locket with tiny fingerprints on the clasp. I didn't remember any of them, but I clutched the box like they were pieces of a language I'd forgotten how to speak. Margot touched my arm. You don't have to become her again. You get to choose. I looked back through the glass door, Lena clearing plates, Jude licking his spoon. I don't know who I am yet, I whispered. That's okay, she said. We'll wait. And for the first time in weeks, I believed someone when they said that. I didn't erase the name Noelle. I couldn't. It was the name that grew up with me, on library cards, job applications, in every note my parents ever left on the fridge. It held memories, attachments, even if they were built on something stolen. That part of me was real, still is. But Eleanor, the girl who disappeared, she matters too. She existed before anyone tried to rename her. And even if I don't remember her swing set, or her rabbit, or the yard she vanished from, I now know she was loved, searched for, missed beyond measure. I live between those names now. Noelle shows up for work, answers emails, pays bills. Eleanor is in the locket I keep in my nightstand, in Lena's stories, in Margot's careful texts. Every Tuesday, Lena and I meet for coffee. She brings clippings and memories. She never pressures. Some days we talk, some days we don't. But she's there, steady, warm, and unbelievably patient. Margot checks in with a kind of quiet grace. Her texts are short, thoughtful. Sometimes a photo of Jude's newest drawing. Once just the words, "You're still my sister, always were." The Hartleys, Robert and Elise, we meet once a month. Dinner is careful but honest. They don't pretend anymore. They're in therapy. I am too. I haven't forgiven them. Not fully. But I'm not carrying their shame for them either. That weight was never mine to bear. What I've learned is this. You don't always get to choose how your story begins. But you can choose who gets to help you write the next chapter. My legal name now reads Noelle McKinley Hartley. It's not elegant, but it's true. It honors both the life I lived and the one I never got to finish. I don't feel lost anymore. I feel whole.